Why does the chosen man, the rare individual who feels set apart from the noise of the world, so often walk alone? This is not simply a matter of temperament or personality. It is the very condition of awakening. The chosen man, whether we speak of him in the voice of Alan Watts, with his playful wisdom about the illusions of society, or in the piercing insights of Byung-Chul Han, who diagnoses the sickness of our hypermodern age, finds himself out of step with the ordinary rhythms of the crowd. He discovers that solitude is not loneliness but the natural ground of authenticity. To walk alone is to refuse the easy comforts of conformity, to refuse the sleepwalking existence that most accept as life. This video explores why the chosen man always walks alone, and what we may learn from his journey. We will move through 7 parts of this exploration, guided by the words and spirit of 2 voices, Alan Watts and Byung-Chul Han, whose philosophies intersect in revealing ways. Watts shows us how freedom is found not in clinging to rigid identities but in dissolving into the dance of existence. Han shows us how modern society's obsession with productivity, transparency, and endless positivity erodes true contemplation and silence. Together they illuminate why solitude is both burden and blessing, exile and liberation, for the one who seeks truth. Part 1. The burden of awakening. The first reason the chosen man always walks alone is that he awakens before others do. He sees what most refuse to see. Alan Watts often reminded us that society thrives on illusions. The illusion of control, the illusion of permanence, the illusion of self as something solid and separate. Most people accept these illusions willingly because they provide comfort. But the chosen man, whether by accident of temperament, by a sudden rupture in life, or by a long path of seeking, cannot rest inside these illusions. Imagine standing in a theater while everyone else is captivated by a play. The actors speak their lines, the audience laughs and cries, and the world feels utterly real to them. But then, you suddenly glimpse behind the curtain. You see the ropes, the machinery, the actors rehearsing their roles. You realize the whole thing is a performance. At first you may want to tell others to shake them awake, but more often than not they will resist. They do not want the curtain pulled back. They prefer the dream. And so the one who sees is left in silence, walking alone with his awareness. Byung-Chul Han offers a striking parallel. In his writings on the society of transparency and the burnout age, he shows us that today's world is built on relentless positivity, endless productivity, and the tyranny of exposure. Everyone must constantly perform, prove, and produce. To resist this, to step away from the demand to always be visible, always be efficient, is to become invisible to society. The chosen man then is not celebrated but quietly exiled. His refusal to participate in this machinery sets him apart. Thus his awakening is not just clarity, but also burden. The burden of seeing too much, too soon, too clearly. Part 2. The silence of solitude. The second reason the chosen man walks alone is that true. Solitude is the only soil where his insights can grow. Alan Watts often said that silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness. Only in this stillness does one begin to hear the subtle rhythms of life, the breathing of the earth, the movement of thoughts, the spaces between words. For the chosen man, solitude is not a punishment but a necessity. It is in solitude that he sheds the false identities imposed by society, worker, consumer, performer, and encounters the simple fact of being. But solitude is not easy. The modern world, as Byung-Chul Han observes, is allergic to silence. We fill every gap with noise, notifications, chatter, entertainment, data. We fear the pause because in silence we might encounter ourselves, naked and unshielded. The chosen man, however, does not flee from silence. He sits with it. He walks into it. And in doing so, he discovers truths that cannot be spoken in the language of efficiency or performance. This silence sets him apart because society cannot understand it. To the crowd, solitude looks like loneliness. Silence looks like emptiness. Withdrawal looks like failure. But for the chosen man, these very experiences become doorways to freedom. The crowd seeks stimulation. He seeks depth. The crowd wants distraction. He wants presence. And so naturally he walks a path where few can follow. Part 3. The weight of freedom. The third reason the chosen man walks alone is that freedom itself is heavy. Most people speak of freedom as if it were an unqualified blessing, something everyone desires without question. But Alan Watts pointed out that real freedom is frightening, because it comes without guarantees, without solid ground, without the safety of absolute rules. To be free means to dance on the edge of uncertainty, to let go of the rigid certainties that give others comfort. For the chosen man, freedom is not a slogan but a lived experience, and that experience often separates him from the crowd. When Watts spoke of freedom, he described it as dissolving into the flow of life, recognizing that the self is not a fixed entity but a process, a rhythm, a relationship. This realization is liberating but also destabilizing. If the self is not fixed, then nothing is fixed. If there is no ultimate authority to cling to, no permanent identity to protect, then life becomes a vast openness. For the crowd, this openness feels like chaos. They prefer the cage of certainty, the stability of rules, the predictability of roles. But the chosen man cannot return to that cage. His freedom, once glimpsed, cannot be forgotten. And so he walks with the weight of that freedom, exhilarating yet isolating. Byung-Chul Han deepens this point in a modern context. In his analysis of neoliberal society, he shows how freedom has been twisted into a new form of compulsion. Today we are told we are free to achieve, free to optimize, free to become anything we want. But this so-called freedom is nothing more than self-exploitation. We work ourselves to exhaustion in the name of freedom, enslaved not by external masters but by internalized demands. The chosen man sees through this deception. He recognizes that what society calls freedom is often just another form of control. In stepping outside of this cycle, he claims a different kind of freedom, one rooted in being rather than doing. Yet this freedom cannot be shared easily, because it threatens the very structures that sustain the collective dream. Thus the chosen man's freedom isolates him, placing him on a path where he must walk largely alone. Part 4. The refusal of noise. The fourth reason the chosen man always walks alone is his refusal to drown in noise. Alan Watts often warned that the human mind is like a monkey, constantly restless, chattering, leaping from one thought to another. Modern society amplifies this tendency by surrounding us with endless distractions. Headlines, advertisements, social media feeds, and the constant hum of machines. To dwell in this noise is to remain asleep, never touching the stillness at the heart of existence. The chosen man, however, cannot tolerate this constant distraction. He learns to turn away from the noise, to withdraw into silence to protect his inner space. This is not misanthropy, but necessity. Just as a seed needs darkness and stillness to germinate, the chosen man needs quiet to grow. When he turns away from the relentless chatter of society, he finds a deeper conversation, the dialogue between himself and the universe, the echo of eternity in his own being. Byung-Chul Han captures this brilliantly in his critique of what he calls the inferno of the same. Today's digital culture, we are flooded with information, images, and voices, yet very little that is truly other, truly new. Everything repeats itself, endlessly recycled, stripped of depth. This saturation of sameness destroys genuine listening, genuine encounter. The chosen man refuses this inferno. He chooses to listen instead to the rare, the subtle, the profound. And because this listening cannot happen in the crowd, he must walk apart. His refusal of noise is seen as strangeness, his silence mistaken for weakness. Yet in truth, it is this silence that nourishes his strength. Watts would remind us that music exists not only in the notes but in the spaces between them. Likewise, the chosen man recognizes that life's meaning is found not in constant activity, but in the pauses, the gaps, the spaces of stillness. This insight sets him apart from a society addicted to constant stimulation. And so once again, he finds himself walking a quieter path, one where few are willing to follow. Part 5. The cost of authenticity. The fifth reason the chosen man always walks alone is that authenticity has a cost that few are willing to pay. Alan Watts spoke often of masks, how we wear them to play our roles in society, how we pretend to be who we think we are supposed to be. Most people never remove these masks because they fear rejection, exposure, or emptiness. But the chosen man, in his search for truth, cannot keep wearing them. He tears them away, even when it hurts, even when it leaves him vulnerable. This act of authenticity isolates him because society depends on masks. We applaud the worker who sacrifices his soul for productivity, the influencer who curates a perfect life online, the citizen who obeys silently. To strip away these roles is to disrupt the game. The chosen man, by his very existence, threatens the illusion. Others sense this and often respond with hostility, suspicion, or dismissal. He is called strange, arrogant, or naive, but in truth he is simply unwilling to live inauthentically. Byung-Chul Han frames this cost in terms of modern subjectivity. In his book, The Expulsion of the Other, he warns that modern culture reduces everything to performance and sameness, leaving little room for the authentic encounter with what is truly other. The chosen man resists this reduction. He insists on depth, on honesty, on real presence. But authenticity in a culture of masks is a kind of rebellion, and every rebel walks alone. The chosen man understands that authenticity does not guarantee acceptance, it almost guarantees rejection. Yet he chooses it anyway, because to live otherwise would be to betray his own being. Watts would say that the true self is not something we can invent, but something we discover when we stop pretending. The chosen man has stopped pretending, and though this costs him companionship, comfort, and belonging, it grants him something greater, integrity. And so, in his authenticity, he accepts solitude as the price of truth. Part 6. The vision beyond the crowd. The sixth reason the chosen man always walks alone is that his vision stretches beyond the horizon of the crowd. Alan Watts reminded us that most people live within narrow boundaries of thought and culture. They inherit beliefs, adopt customs, and rarely question the foundations of their worldview. For them, the boundaries of reality are fixed and unquestionable, but the chosen man sees beyond these limits. His vision pierces the horizon, sensing patterns and truths invisible to the collective gaze. This vision is exhilarating but also isolating. When the chosen man tries to share what he sees, the crowd may dismiss him. They may laugh, resist, or attack because his vision threatens their comfort. To say that life is an illusion, that the self is a construct, or that society is built on false idols, is to shake the ground beneath ordinary life. Watts often described such truths as cosmic jokes, so simple, so obvious once seen, and yet so scandalous to those who remain invested in the illusion. Byung-Chul Han explains this in terms of the crisis of meaning in modernity. He argues that today's culture, obsessed with productivity and data, has lost sight of transcendence. Everything is reduced to measurable outcomes, to economic value, to visibility. The chosen man, however, refuses this flattening of meaning. He insists on depth, transcendence, mystery. His vision cannot be measured, cannot be translated into statistics, and thus it is disregarded by the crowd. Yet for him, this vision is everything. It is the fire that guides his path. And because no one else can see exactly what he sees, he must often walk alone. Watts would say that to awaken is to realize you are not separate from the universe but a part of its unfolding. To live with this awareness is to live differently from the crowd, who cling to separateness and control. The chosen man carries this vision like a lantern in the night. But lanterns cast light on only a small portion of the path. Few will follow him into that uncertain light. So he walks alone, guided by a vision that expands far beyond the limits of ordinary sight. Part 7. The Gift of Solitude. The seventh and final reason the chosen man always walks alone is that solitude, though difficult, is also his greatest gift. For Alan Watts, solitude was not a void but a fullness, a recognition that in being alone, one is never truly separate from the whole. To sit in solitude is to discover that you are not merely an isolated ego, but the entire universe looking at itself through your eyes. In this recognition, solitude becomes communion. For Byung-Chul Han, solitude is also resistance. In a world that demands constant activity, visibility, and communication, to withdraw into silence is a radical act. It is a refusal to be consumed by the machinery of endless productivity. True solitude opens the possibility of contemplation, of genuine thought, of authentic life. It is in solitude that the chosen man becomes most himself, not because he rejects others, but because he finally rests in being. This solitude is misunderstood by society. It is mistaken for weakness, sadness, or failure. Yet for the chosen man, solitude is the condition of strength. It sharpens his vision, deepens his freedom, and roots his authenticity. Alone he communes with silence, with nature, with the eternal rhythm of life. Alone he becomes whole. And so, though solitude may appear as exile, it is in truth initiation. The chosen man walks alone not because he despises others, but because he has been called into a deeper conversation, a dialogue with existence itself. And in that dialogue, he discovers a joy that cannot be explained, only lived. Ending. Walking the path. The chosen man always walks alone, not as punishment, not as accident, but as destiny. His solitude is the price of awakening, the burden of freedom, the cost of authenticity. He refuses noise, he resists illusion, he embraces silence. Guided by vision, rooted in solitude, he carries within him a truth that few can see and fewer still can accept. Alan Watts would tell us that life is not a problem to be solved, but a dance to be enjoyed. The chosen man dances differently to rhythms the crowd cannot hear. Byung-Chul Han would remind us that in an age of burnout and endless performance, the ability to step back into stillness is itself a form of power. The chosen man embodies that power, not in domination over others, but in fidelity to being itself. If you too feel the weight of solitude, do not mistake it for emptiness. It may be the mark of awakening. To walk alone is not to be abandoned. It is to be entrusted with a path that leads inward and outward at once. The chosen man's solitude is not a curse, but a gift, one that reveals the infinite within the silence. So why does the chosen man always walk alone? Because truth is a narrow path, because authenticity is costly, because vision demands solitude, and because in the end the deepest journey cannot be shared, it must be walked. Alone yet never alone, for in walking apart, the chosen man discovers his unity with all things.